Good evening, poultry keepers. We are happy to have you here with us tonight. It's just Jeff and I tonight. Carrie's off with some Christmas festivities with his family tonight, and I hope they have a good time. But we got a really fun show. We've got a lot of questions lined up already, and I hope as you join us, you'll bring your questions too. We're always happy to answer those. Jeff, it's been a while since you've been on, and
Where was it? Yeah, where was I last time? I don't know.
in
I don't know
Minnesota,
where
I
I've
think,
been.
or you get
Yeah.
around so.
Well,
But
was it? It wasn't Thanksgiving, was it? That we? I think
no,
it fell on. It didn't fall on Thanksgiving.
no.
Huh.
We fell
I don't
on.
know. I don't know where I've been, Rip. I have no idea.
Well, don't feel bad. I'm the same way. Um, we've got. Well, I'm not going to get into the questions right now. We'll do those in just a minute. So coming right up, we are going to have at it. Okay. This is Jeff's favorite format for a show, and it's one of my favorite formats for a show. We get some really good questions, and I had a couple pitched to me over the last few days, and I thought, I'm going to have to look that information up. But I was able to find out something, so we got answers for everything that we came with. Uh, so we thought we'd just go ahead and get started with it. I'll make that full screen or I'll never read it. What factors contribute to a rooster's crow? Is it size, breed, genetics, or something else? And actually, it's a little bit of everything that can contribute to a rooster's crow. Now, if you've ever raised a breed, for a few years, pretty soon you get to where you can identify that breed by the crow that it makes. I've done that with reds, and I know some of them have done it with Barnevelders and the other things. So it's just getting used to the sounds that your birds make. Um, so, yeah, breed can be a factor. Size and body structure can also be a factor. Larger birds typically have deeper, throatier crows than small crows. Other than small birds, of course, bantams are going to be a little on the screechy, high pitched side, but that can play a factor in it. Genetics is a key determinant in the sound of a rooster's crow. Specifically, vocal traits are heritable, meaning a rooster may inherit its crow, the tone, pitch, or pattern from its parents. I thought that was pretty interesting. Uh, can also be influenced by hormones. The testosterone levels seem to heavily impact the frequency of crowing, the intensity of crowing. Um, Roosters with higher testosterone levels are more likely to crow loudly and often. And sometimes their personalities can even be a factor into that. I never thought about tying personality to a rooster's crow.
Hmm.
Um, and to
Well,
some extent, the flock dynamics. Roosters and multi-rooster flocks often adjust their crowing to establish, maintain their dominance within the flock. So there you have it. I've written up I found good bit of information. I wrote it up into a little article, and I'll post that tomorrow over on our Facebook groups. So there's
we've
some
got
good
some
information
questions
there.
coming in, so let me know when you're ready.
Okay,
So
well, let's take one by
I
all
like do
means.
those. I like doing them though when they're fresh. And
Yes, absolutely.
Elizabeth asked, we have 1/3 acre of pasture for their chickens,
Hmm.
and she wanted to know if there's any way to lessen the parasite or health impact of having the birds on the same ground for multiple years.
Good question.
And there is, and the way to do this, Elizabeth, is to if it was mine, let me say it this way, okay? I would even break up the 1/3 into, say, 6 equal paddocks with some sort of a laneway down through the middle. Never let them have the entire thing. So as soon as they've eaten everything that's green in each respective paddock, I would go in there with a high calcium limestone. Um, I mean, you can use regular yard lime, but most soils are lacking in calcium. So I would go in there and, um, make it white, right? Don't be afraid about how much you're putting in there. And then if you have a way to kind of incorporate it lightly, whether you're, rake, hoe, disc, something, and then water it in really good. But high calcium is a natural purifier by itself. It's also a desiccant, so it'll suck moisture away from bacteria, viruses, parasites, etc. So when you first apply it, leave it for 3 to 4 days before you incorporate it. And then, but if you continually apply the lime behind each time the chickens go through there and reseed it, it's going to do wonders. But exposure to sun, things like, high calcium lime are going to do a lot for managing parasites and health impact of those pastures.
Very good.
Yeah,
It's that, and I see that come up quite often in the groups.
yeah.
So I'm glad we
Sue,
could.
she's been reading your post, but Sue wants to know which is the most desirable calcium. And the answer is actually both. So when I put together poultry diets for laying hens, I typically want 2/3 of the calcium to be from finer particle, sand-like particle, and I want 1/3 of the total calcium to be from something larger, like oyster shell. And because there's really great data, of course, you got to have colleges and universities study everything, but there's some really great data that the calcium requires slow dissolving calcium at night while she's on the roost sleeping. And because that is actually when the eggshell is being formed. And so, and for people who feed early in the day, let's say you're a morning feeder type person, most of the fine calcium has already passed through the digestive tract and is no longer there for that eggshell at 3 o'clock in the morning. Typically, most eggs are the eggshell gland is forming between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning. So this is on younger hens, pullets, things like that. It changes as they get older, but for the most part, the eggshell gland is the last part, and it's usually occurring, while they're still on the roost, the last 2 hours of sleep before you wake them up and get them going. So that's what I know.
Very good. Let's see. We had another good question here. Okay, here we go. How much protein is too much for cocks? At what level can signs of gout appear? Jeff, I don't know that I've seen anything about protein levels as it applies to gout, but
So both overfeeding the protein. Okay, so both the calcium and the protein, and here's why, Rip, because extra protein is actually stressing the kidneys and causing because the kidneys have to deal with that extra nitrogen or protein. So if they're under stress from the protein, you can also get your calcium buildup. But both protein and calcium are your top two leading contributors to gout. And when you go to the Merck Vet Manual, listing for poultry gout, it'll talk about visceral gout and this gout, and there's more than one kind of gout for a chicken. But to answer Dario's question, okay, we can't think of it so much in terms of percent, and we've talked about this in some other shows. It's more how many grams of protein. And so I have to take the amount of feed times the percent of protein and then determine, turn that into grams, which, is a long math equation. But, we're only looking for like 10, between 9 and 11 grams of protein is plenty. Now, that being said, and Dario has Saramas, and he also has the Inagadoris, which I was able to stop and see. So those, heavier plumage birds or small eaters like the Saramas, I would still want to keep them probably around 18% once they're mature, right? Mature cocks, breeding purposes. I just want to be careful not to feed them, everything that they want to eat. Okay. Because, either they'll eat out of boredom, of course they're going to eat for their energy needs every day. So trying to figure out a way to limit those birds. But I would think, for the Saramas between 18 and 20%, as long as the amino acids are there. Okay. And I see a lot of people posting stuff about feeding 24s, 26s, like game bird starters, 28s, and they're overcompensating to get better feathers because the amino acid profile of their feed isn't that good. I mean, there's the truth of it. So, you can get by with a much lower protein if you address the amino acids, right? And I got a friend in Kentucky, and he's feeding a 16%, feed formula that I put together for him. But the amino acids, like the lyseine's running at 1.2, and the methionine's running at, 0.55. And, he told me, he says, this is feeding more like an 18 or a 20%. He goes, I had to cut way back because, the birds were growing too fast and just to, it's more about having all the right components in place, than it is focusing on that protein number. So, all right, what else we got?
Jerry also had the same question. He said also, same question for calcium and calcium toxicity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why, and I've preached it before on the show. I really don't want males being on layer feed for a long period of time. Okay. It's fine during the mating. You put a rooster in there and let him do his job, and hopefully you're moving him around to if you're doing single mating or trio mating, something like that, then, he's constantly on the move. But once breeding season's over and you're done collecting eggs, he needs to be on, more of a low calcium, like a grower feed, for instance. And so he gets a chance to flush that out. The other thing I like is using large particle calcium like the oyster shell. And the roosters will actually eat around it. Okay. They can identify it and they can take what they want. So it gives you a little bit of a free choice environment where they can, they just won't eat the white stuff, right? They'll eat what they need. Then it's less of a danger. But going full-time layer feed, with males and with cocks and hens, look, how long is it going to take for you to see the difference? I've seen roosters at 7, 8 years old that have been stuck on layer feed their entire life. But I also know I've seen roosters go out to 12, 13, and 14 years still mating, okay, that have been maintained without all that additional calcium. And so you're definitely going to get a longer lifespan out of a rooster if we're not feeding him layer pellets his entire life. Is what I'm getting at.
Well, and that's good to know information too, but I wish a lot of folks would hear that and take that to heart, because I do hear some of them say, well, I feed my cocks and my hens on layer feed, and I've not had a problem in 5 or 6 years. Well,
okay,
that's fortunate.
And if you've got lots of breeders and you got depth in your genetics and 5 years is all you want out of your rooster, hey, more power to you. But someday you're going to find that perfect rooster, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to be one of a kind, and you're going to wish you had him for 14 years, right? And put him on every hen you got. But
I've
sooner or
been in
later,
that very same boat.
yeah, yeah. And, you get out to that 7 or 8 years and he's not fertile. He doesn't do his job very well. You have a hard time getting good hatching eggs out of him, right? And you just wish you could get just a couple more years. It's kind of like us, Rip. We're getting at that age where just a
Oh,
couple
don't
more years.
remind me. My God. Hey, I was doing
Uh-huh.
pretty good. You brought that up.
Sorry.
Let's see. Got this is a good one. How do I keep my flock entertained during the snowy days? They have a 10 by 20 coop and 1/4 of acre to free range, but refuse to go out when there's snow on the ground. Can't say I blame them for that. I don't think I would either. Don't want them
Yeah.
to get bored and start picking on each other.
Okay. Steph, two things. All right. So for the first couple of snows of the year, because I do live in snow country, so I can answer this one. I would actually scatter out some straw on top of the snow. And because I limit fed, the birds were plenty hungry when it came feeding time. And I would feed them out, out of the coop. So they would have to come out to eat. Usually after the first or second snow, they figured out it was okay and safe. The other thing to do, though, is if you can get baled hay in the small square bales, I would find a way to hang some alfalfa, in like a hay bag, like a horse would
Yeah,
use,
those work great. Those work great.
and high it up, and hang it up high enough so they got to stretch just a little bit. Don't make it too easy for them, right? And that's really good enrichment and or entertainment to keep them from pecking each other. But yeah, you got to watch because when those snowstorms are coming in, when the barometer drops, it does stress the birds out, and it is a higher likelihood of them showing aggressive behavior towards each other. So just I've seen it too many times, and especially in snowy country. Um, try and reduce the light a little bit. You want to have them in muted light because when the light reflects off of that fresh snow, it really drives their optic, their eyes and their sensory crazy. So
I hadn't thought about that, but I can see how that would happen. Yeah.
that fresh white snow, I mean, just the combination of a storm coming in, right? Barometer drops, then you get the fresh white snow, and the sun comes out the next morning. Holy cow! Right? You've got light everywhere. So having some muted light areas for them, keep them more comfortable. All right, what else you got, Rip?
Um, Joy, she said, I'm sorry, I missed a word. Did Jeff say put lime on the soil in a pasture?
Yes, I did. High calcium lime. Okay, it'll typically be above 30% calcium and less than 10% magnesium. And you will see lots of wonderful things occurring in your pastures.
That's for sure. Um, Let me take one more from our list of questions here. Hi, I breed mottled silkies in addition to Polish and Howdens. In particular, my silky chicks sometimes have a problem with pasty butt. I already do yogurt and it doesn't solve the issue. Is there anything else I can feed to help with the issue? And she's currently using a non medicated chick starter to which she adds water at every feeding. But she's open to suggestions on the best chick starter. You know, I used to have problems with pasty butt, but when I started feeding baby chicks uh, grit, that I never had any problem with pasty butt after that. Don't know what it is
I wonder
about
what the
that.
grit, yeah. Yeah, I wonder what the grit. Well, okay, it does slow things down in the gizzard, right?
Right.
So if the grit, if there's an appropriate amount of grit, and you know, and I want everybody to do this, but if one of your birds dies, and you are feeding grit, or not feeding grit, do the necropsy, open it up, and look inside the gizzard. And I'll tell you that the gizzard should be 40 to 50% small stones. If it's not, you're not doing right by your chickens. Anyway, I get off my soapbox about grit. I don't know which, I don't know which chick starter she's getting. Um, and that could be part of it. Yeah, I've seen pasty butt from being too hot. People run their
Yep.
brooders too hot, and that causes them to drink more water. She didn't say if she was doing anything with electrolytes, but the salt in those little electrolyte packs is high, which forces them to drink more water. And I'll always see some pasty butt following electrolyte mixing, the commercial electrolyte mix, right?
Yep.
I'll see pasty butt, and but never hurts to try a different chick starter just to see if that was the. But then it's pretty anecdotal because it may have stopped on its own, right?
Right.
So it's hard to tell, and so I don't want to jump on that train too hard. I mean, if it's a decent commercial brand chick starter, non-medicated chick starter, I mean, I hope it's okay. But the other thing to think is this time of year, actually, chick starters don't stay fresh. Most people start the birds in April, March, April, May, right? That's when they get their chicks. So chick starters are going to tend to be fresher, that time of the year.
Makes sense.
Okay, so without knowing the lot number or the date of manufacturing, that chick starter could be getting close to a year old, and that could be part of the problem right there.
Yeah.
It's interesting though; it's only her silkies, right? Not her Polish. Thank
Yeah.
you for pronouncing that for me because I always thought it was Houdans, more of that
It may
French
be.
kind of Creole. I don't know. I don't know. I'll admit I do not know, but
You were talking about the glare off of snow. Jessica Watson says, I save all my hay sweepings from the barn over the warm season and bag it up. I sprinkle it all over the snow and to take the reflection down in winter.
yeah, works great. And it looks enough like dirt or whatever that they'll go out and walk around on it. So, and she definitely lives in snow country, so she knows what she's talking about.
Yep. She was bemoaning the fact of all the snow already a little earlier in the week.
Yeah, I mean, it's some places it's coming hard. It's coming way harder than anticipated. I was looking at Mr. Gunnerman's post up there in Vermont, and they're getting hammered up there. So,
Oh, man.
yep,
Big time. Big time.
nothing here. We've had a few flurries, but nothing here. Pennsylvania's still clear. At least southern Pennsylvania's still clear.
Here's another one that we garnered from one of the groups. My question is, should bigger heritage breeds like Barnevelders or Sussex get a different protein level, higher or lower than 20%, versus what should smaller, lesser, leaner breeds like Leghorns and Legbars get higher or lower than 20%? All her
And they
birds are for
and they
breeding.
should.
And
Yeah.
you kind of answered that a little bit earlier.
Right. So when you're feeding to maintain like a Barnevelder or a Sussex or a large breed, I mean, a really, 8 to 10 pound type chicken, we can do, again, not, I get tired of saying this, and I know people are tired of hearing me, but if I could find a 16 or 17% with the right amino acids, that would be plenty, okay, to maintain those larger birds because they're going to be desiring more like 4 and 5 ounces of feed, not, and then when your lighter breeds like your leghorns and leg bars, they're only going to eat that 3 ounces of feed. So, yeah, it would be nice to have a different protein, you know, based on the body conformation and size of each breed. And that's not realistic for everybody, but yeah.
True.
It would be great to see a really good, high quality 16% going in there for those heavy breeds.
It would be.
As long as those amino acids are right? 16, 17%. So,
Sue is
who
setting the
dan?
record straight. Who
Thank
Dan?
you, Sue.
We
Who
appreciate
dan?
that, kid. Let's get one more here. We were talking about this just before we went on air, but I've been ordering organic whole corn through Azure Standard and have been happy with the look of it. But these last two 50-pound bags have kernels that look dark, not the typical bright yellow. There's also a smell, not pungent, but maybe rancid. I'm thinking it's best not to feed this, and I'm writing to the company. But what is it? Spoiled or rancid?
And I was telling you about grains needing to sweat out, Rick. And if that got put in a bin and the moisture was above 15%, it's going to go through a sweat or a heating process. And it's probably what we refer to as musty and dusty. And that's going to be that off smell. And so, and I was telling Rip before we came on, every carbohydrate grain, okay, oat, barley, wheat, triticale, corn, all of those. So something triggers an enzyme in the grain, in the kernel, right? When you detach it from its stem or stalk or ear or whatever, okay, and it's going to go through its final kind of ferment, if you will, or preservation stage. So it needs somewhere around 14 to 21 days. Um, so I really hate feeding new crop. So when the new harvest occurs, and people run down to the farm and they buy some brand new fresh, corn or oats or whatever, right? It's really not ready to feed. It needs to finish. Okay. There's something triggered in that grain, right? And it's going to go through a curing process that we refer to as a sweat. Again, it's going to need at least 14 to 21 days before it's actually digestible by the animal eating it. And if you feed stuff too early before that's occurred, you're going to get pasty butt and you're going to get loose droppings and you're just going to end up with a mess. So, but in that case, yeah, I think it is spoiled, and I think it was put into a bin too early and wasn't dried enough because the cost of drying, because they use propane. Um, if somebody just took it to that bare minimum threshold and put it in a bin and it sweated out and caused it to mold. It's a low level mold is what's actually going on with that grain.
Got it. Let's
All right,
see.
what else we got?
Rachel said, I'm currently free feeding Comback to a Neutrino layer feed or Neutrino layer feed to my chickens. If I switch to Kraut Creek, a better quality feed, I'd like to limit feed. How do I properly calculate their daily needs, especially for winter? I have both large fowl and bantams.
All right, so my starting rule of thumb, Rachel, is to use 1 ounce of feed per pound of live weight. Okay. Now, that's just kind of a rule of thumb. But with the Kraut Creek feed, most of your large breeds are going to be fine at, they're going to do really well at 3.5 to 4 ounces of feed, for the heavy breeds. Your bantams are going to be 1 to 1.5 ounces per bantam is plenty. Okay. But we're going to need to adjust from there based on body weight. So, take a starting weight and, let's check them in a month and see where they're at. You're not going to lose a bunch of weight or gain a bunch of weight in a month. My recommendation of that 4 ounces for the large breed, 1.5 ounces for the bantams, you're not going to be way out of whack, but I don't want to get you out of the range of the standard either. So, or if they get too fat, then they're not going to breed right. So let's just check them in a month. Remember who you weighed, check them in a month, see where we're at. But I would say 4 ounces for the large breeds, ounce and a half for the bantams.
Very good. See, we got another one here. Is it possible to overdo protein? My local chicken groups seem to be a bit obsessed with this lately. They are adding pinto beans and cat food to commercial rations in an attempt to increase winter laying. Is there a threshold where protein becomes a hindrance rather than a benefit? And again, we've been
Yeah,
talking about that.
we talked about that pretty good already,
Yeah.
but people don't really understand that pinto beans are not a very high protein. Most of your bean families, whether you're talking about any of the edible beans like kidneys, white navies, pintos, black beans, etc., all run in about a 25% protein range. So they're really not that high. And most commercial cat foods are running around 22 to 24% protein also. So they're not really boosting the protein a whole lot. And they're not making the difference they think they're making. But I guess it feels good. I don't know. You got me. It makes no sense whatsoever to me. So
Oh, we were talking earlier about keeping our birds entertained and
mhm.
enriched some way. Rex said he's found that a spade of dirt he throws in the chicken house will keep them entertained and keep them from pecking each other.
It's true. And I
Absolutely.
know a lot of people that'll go get clean sod,
Hmm.
someplace where the chickens have never been, but they'll go cut out, a chunk of clean sod and put it in there for baby chicks.
Yes,
And it
I've
acts
done
as an
that.
inoculant. Yeah, yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Okay. See, we got another question here. Let me get rid of them. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing and it's not working.
All right.
Okay,
All
here we
right.
go.
Okay. You got her?
Got her.
Okay.
In these cold temps, what humidity is too high in the coop? They have a mixed flock of chickens and ducks, and they're struggling with humidity. I can imagine that they are combining waterfowl and chickens.
Yeah.
That's going to be a bit of a challenge.
It's going to be a lot of a challenge. So, to me, you want to be 50, 60%. If your humidity gets much over 75 or 80, um, you're just making that swampy environment where, respiratory diseases, coryza, MG, all those things are just going to be, they're going to thrive well in a higher
Yes,
humidity.
yes.
And so we just don't, you know, anything under, I would say 50 or 60%, as long as we can keep it under that. And I mean, we don't want it too dry, but I can't see that being a problem. I think they're struggling with the higher humidity side of things.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, unless they're living in a desert somewhere, they're probably struggling with high humidity.
And our next question is I live in a place where winters are not as harsh or as long as other places that are living on the coastal South Carolina area. Either way, my chicks are still on heat, and I will be decreasing the heat each week like I should. Does anyone know or have a used light dimmer switch? Does anyone know or have used a light dimmer switch controls order to bring the heat intensity down each week? Um, and she admittedly, I didn't include that here, but she understands the problem about using glass heat bulbs and the potential for coop fires. You know, most of those lamps that I've seen are 100 watts at least or higher. I quit using those a long time ago and switched over to a ceramic. It's basically a reptile heater, but it screws into a socket just like a regular light bulb, but it's more of a radiant heat, and they're really tough and almost indestructible. And I've had good luck with those. And you can get them, I think, from you can get 40s, 60s, 75s, and 100 or even higher wattage. So that was the easiest way I found to adjust them. But
Yeah,
if you've had it on, be careful. Don't grab it because it will be hot.
yeah. I mean, you're still doing something of a radiant type heater. So, whether you're doing a heating plate or, the ceramic ones like you're talking about, They're definitely safer than the old red, bulb. But I mean, the last time I brooded chicks, I still use the old 150-watt red light bulb,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't put it in where the water was, and I didn't put it in where the chicks were, right? Because I use the Ohio brooder, the 4x4 square box.
Yeah.
And I cut a hole in the top of it so the light could sit in the middle of that hole, up above all the feed and water and the chicks. And yeah, those bulbs don't handle well, right? They do not like getting moved around a lot. And, and if you accidentally hit it with a little bit of moisture, it's a problem. So,
Laura says she loves the ceramic bulbs.
yep, I agree. That's the safest way to go.
And Sue is doing what you suggested. She uses the plate heaters where the
Yep.
chicks can come and go as they wish.
Yep. Both are much safer options than the old red light bulb,
Yes.
the old red heat lamp. So,
Another question here. I was just watching how to apply the standard episode, and I'm trying to figure out why the standard would change. I breed Buckeyes, and why would I not breed a Buckeye today to what they were originally designed for versus what they want to look like in a show? Well, this is a good hot button for me because if you breed to the written standard, okay, you're going to have a bird that is capable of doing the job they were created to do, whether that's meat production, egg production, or dual purpose. And breed standards do sometimes change, not frequently and not drastically. For example, they may find an error in one from typo that was overlooked for quite some time, and they'll change that. It's not easy to change standards. You have to have a good case for why you want to change or amend the standard, and it has to go before the committee, and the committee has to approve it, and then the board of directors for the American Poultry Association have to approve it. So it's not just something that happens willy nilly. But I'm all in favor of breeding birds for the purpose to which they were intended to be used. Something a lot of exhibition folks overlook. If I could wave my magic wand, that would be one thing I would correct. Is ground limestone grit?
no,
No.
no, it's a calcium source, and it is referred to as soluble grit, right? And it's only in the gizzard for a short time, less than 24 hours, and then it's out of there. So grit is usually a harder stone, either granite or quartzite or something that's going to stay in there for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And it actually has no mineral value, no significant mineral value to throw off the overall total nutrition of the bird.
And I also think of granite as having more sharp, angular edges than I do the limestone grit.
Right. It's rougher. All the sides on the granite are rough. So you're going to get a much better pulverizing and nutrient absorption out of using the granite. People just can't believe that, paying the money for a bag of grit is going to pay for itself. But everything I've ever seen is a 7 to 10% reduction in feed or increase in feed efficiency. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So, you do the math. What are you paying for a bag of good feed? And if you can reduce that by 7%, and a large fowl, a mature fowl is going to consume about 1.5 to 2 ounces of grit per month. So for 1.5 pounds of grit,
That really stretches your
in a
feed bill.
year, I think it really stretches. They're actually healthier. I do the grit more importantly because of the health of the bird. Okay. The bird is going to be healthier if it gets more out of its feed, and its digestive tract is working at 100%. But
Here's one for you, Jeff. They want to know, can they substitute wheat for the oats in your frigid mix? What say you?
I still want the fiber, and each one of those grains has a different enzyme activity within it, right? So the wheat is more of a xylanase enzyme, and the oats have the beta glucan enzymes in them. So, if you push me to say yes or no, I'm going to say no. Okay. And oats are not that hard to get. Yes, they cost more, but they're worth it.
I know a lot of the old timers that I knew just fully swore by the value in feeding oats. Good stuff.
We've gotten away from it because oat price has gone high, and General Mills, Quaker, Kellogg's, all those companies. There's been droughts throughout the Midwest the last 4 or 5 years, and the oat crop has been poor. So the demand for oats is really high. I mean, they've lowered their standard on what they accept for food grade oats, just to keep their supply chains going. So we are competing. We are competing with the food industry when it comes to oats. But yeah, the value's there. All right, what
And
else you got?
let's see. Jessica
I know
wants
we
to
can go ahead.
make sure that I get this point, I guess. Why do females of some Oriental game breeds molt twice in 1 year? And I didn't have all the answers. I knew that they did it, but and it's not all game breeds. It just seems to be in the Oriental games. I've never seen American class birds or Mediterranean class birds. The females molt twice, and it seems to be restricted specifically to the females and not the males. Uh, it's influenced by genetics, environmental factors, physiological adaptations, and it it seems that. And Jessica, chime in here if I'm getting this wrong, but it seems like they're wanting to go through this twice a year molt every time after they produce a bunch of chicks or lay a batch of eggs. But I know she told me that and I'll put her response up here. Can you speak as to why a large bird might go through a molt twice in a year? Very common in her hard feathered chamois hens, yes. Chamois, aceals, and I'm going brain dead now. I want to say Morans, but that's not Morans. She'll shoot me for saying that. Um, but they do that twice a year molt, almost regular as clockwork. But this is something else that I'm going to write an article and I'll have that up and post it here within the next few days at least. They there's some schools of thought out there that it's because they come from a tropical quote unquote type of environment. They have a seasonal reproduction thing. Um, it's they think that it may be tied in somehow to a reduced egg output. These Oriental games, Malays is the other one. These Oriental games are not really prolific egg layers, but so it can be attributed to several different factors. And in going through some of the resources that I found on this, it's it's pretty fascinating once you start digging into it. I think you'll enjoy that. See.
There's a couple of old questions further up. If you want to take them, I can pop them up there.
Yeah, do that.
Okay. So Dario asked about non-laying hens. Should they be at reduced calcium? And yes, they should. So when they've quit laying, you want to take them back to a standard like 1%, 1.5% calcium. You don't want to keep pushing the calcium through them if they're not laying. Give them that time to rebuild, and but there's no need to keep feeding them a layer feed if they're not laying. And then the other one that he had, which is really interesting, an article by Hamlet Protein called "Animal Protein is a risk to intestinal health of chickens." Says, feeding those animals protein to young chicks may trigger the onset of dysbiosis in general and necrotic enteritis, and may affect the overall health of the bird due to the production of toxic substances in the ciaca, that they're absorbed and passed into the bloodstream. And you know what I'm going to say, Dario, this is right, particularly if there's any chance that the animal protein has been rancid at any point. And if these animal proteins get wet, even for a short period of time before they're being fed to the bird and they're no longer stable, yes, these things are going to happen, because when a meat protein degrades, a lot of times there's Clostridium bacteria, that's being formed in the breakdown of a meat protein. Yeah. So if it's a poor quality meat protein, or if it's just not been handled correctly, this is definitely an option. And again, this is one of the reasons why I stay with a whole fish meal that's harvested for that purpose, and has been stabilized with antioxidants so that it can have a shelf life. But like feeding roadkill or something, if the meat has turned and started to go rancid, and the birds are going to eat it anyway, right? So I use the term roadkill, but if you literally picked up a dead groundhog alongside the road and opened it up and exposed the meat, they would eat it, and they'd eat on it all week, even though it's gone rancid. So yeah, how the meat protein is handled, how it's stored, and how it is presented to the birds can make all the difference. However, in a natural setting, birds crave meat protein over grain protein always. Okay. I've never seen a chicken turn down, fresh bloody meat. I don't know about you, Rip. You ever see one?
No.
Yeah.
They can't pass it by.
They can't. I think they'd pass by corn before they'd to eat that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, they would.
So fresh meat or properly preserved, meat proteins are definitely going to have great advantages. Okay. So as long as it's been managed, handled, and it's good, and the birds really respond to it. I mean, they grow better, they grow faster. I'm trying to work with somebody to get an experiment done where we actually raise up a group of chicks without grain, and pretty much doing it with fresh meat and fat. Okay, maybe a little bit of grasses or something like that, some alfalfa meal, but hardly any carbohydrate grain, getting all the energy and protein from meat and fat, and just to see how they grow and how they perform. I think it's going to be really good information.
It'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't afford to go buy steak for our chickens every day. I get it, right? But I do think that they have a higher appetite for meat protein than what we're providing them. So I'm anxious to learn this.
I've got a friend up in Ohio that makes it a point and to be real friends with the deer hunters up in his area, and they bring him what's left over after they process the deer, the bones, what's left on the bones and all that, and he regularly feeds that to his chickens.
Yeah, and they should. once the temperatures go down to freezing or, well refrigerated levels, that's excellent to let them pick the tallow and the meat parts and whatever. And there is no chance of those birds pecking at each other if they've got a deer carcass laying out there. So
Now that deer carcass will have their undivided attention. Everything else can just, the whole world can pass them by and they won't know it.
for a long time, it's going to have the undivided attention. So
Getting back to Jessica's comment about the uh, two molts in 1 year, she said it can be helpful because their feathers are so brittle they get two resets. But I want to support them nutritionally through this twice a year molt. Um, and I can see, Jessica, where that could also be of value to having females in show condition pretty much year round because they do that twice a year molt and they grow those feathers back. Let's see. Imperium Cerama's. Let me enlarge that. I can't see.
no, he said, yeah, his ceramas, especially the females,
Molt
they'll
twice.
also molt twice a year. Yeah.
I think
Gary also said that there's a guy in Oregon working on his own giant game breed, and he only feeds raw meat to his birds.
interesting. Interesting.
This is good. Jessica said she ran out of animal protein based feed and she had to buy a few bags of local layer. And her shamos dropped in weight and didn't finish their feed.
Sounded like there was a protest.
They're smarter than they look. Yep. Dobie said he fed cooked fish, and Dobie, I'd give him the raw fish. So I see a lot of people cooking meat, fish, other meats for their chickens. I'd sooner you feed it to them raw. And I'll tell you, one of the best supplements that I can think of, or additions to diets, is if you can find, beef liver, any liver other than chicken. I never believe in feeding same species back to same species. So, but if you liver is awesome, and just a small amount added to the feed because it's really high in vitamins, and it's got a lot of the appropriate type fats. So, yeah, that's a good one.
Let's see. Rachel says, I have a lot.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Have a lot of lard and beef fat available. How much can I add to my chicken's diet daily when it is really cold?
All right. So I don't remember. She's starting with, I thought, one of the Kalmbach feeds, which typically is about 4% fat, 3 to 4% fat. And when it's really cold, you can go as high as 8 or 9. So you could add, like 4% by weight of added fat. So, 4%, it's a half a pound for every 10 pounds of feed, if that helps. It's 0.4 to be precise, but you could probably go at a half a pound. And if it gets cold enough, and you can hang it out there in bags and let them have what they want, as long as it stays frozen and it doesn't, start to thaw out. They can something to peck at and keep each other happy.
It'd work for that too.
I like Laura's question.
Oh yeah.
Can she feed guppies to ducks? Yeah, not a problem. Now, I don't. Okay, wait a minute. So, I'm not really sure. Just make sure that if you're buying like feed guppies from the pet store, just kind of ask around what they're feeding them. If they're feeding a medicated feed to the guppies, or if they've had any health issues in the guppy tank, just be careful. But otherwise, feeding minnows from a bait store or guppies from a pet store, or if you're raising guppies, yes, not a problem.
John Harvey made a comment here that I thought was pretty good. He says, the bone dust, meat dust from the meat saw at work. He works for a public
Yeah,
supermarket, so he
yeah.
has access to all that.
Right, you need to, because that's free, and you need to bring that home and keep it. And
It's worth its weight.
one of the other watchers on here was collecting that, the pink slime that builds up on the saw
Hmm.
at the from the meat saw, and just use it as a supplement or an addition to the feed, right? And it works great. Absolutely, don't throw it away.
No.
Your chickens will hate you if you throw that away.
Let's see. I'd be worried about the fish bones around for the dogs to pick up.
I could see that getting
Yeah,
hung up in their throat. Yep.
makes sense. Makes sense.
Yep. Yep. My dog tends to eat things and then worries about it getting stuck in her throat later too. So I have that. I know what he's talking about.
Laura responded to your guppy comment.
Yeah,
She said
that's
from
fine.
her own aquarium. That'd be fine.
Yep. Yep. When you need to reduce the population, that's a perfect way to go. The chickens like them too, right? And I learned that's
Oh,
personal
yes.
experience. I've watched it. Okay. So
Um,
Cheryl says she saves beef liver.
yeah.
I saved beef liver for chicken. She cuts it into worm-sized pieces, and hers had no interest. That is really strange.
That is strange.
I have not. You're a first, Cheryl. I don't know what to tell you. So
I wonder if it's the size she cut the pieces into.
yeah, I mean, most of my folks are actually putting it through a meat grinder, so it turns into more like a jelly, and then you can just put a spoonful. Now, the first time you do it, because it's new, this is something I really want to touch on for a second, though, Rip.
Yeah, go
So,
for
okay, you've had chickens for how many years, right? 50, 55, 60?
it. 65.
Okay, well, the bid keeps going higher. All right, so in all your years of keeping chickens, and I noticed this when I had chickens here, okay, right? They're used to the same routine every day, right? You come out, you feed them, you water them, you do this, right? Every time I tried to do something new and special for my chickens,
They didn't
they'd
like it.
look at me. They'd look at me like, "What the heck is this?" Right? What am I supposed to do with this? Right? And two things: one, it was different. Two, I really believe that there's a trust factor, right, between you and your birds. I don't think how well do your birds trust you? And this happens even with my pooch sitting here on the couch beside me, right?
Hmm.
I can have something delicious, like, but if she can't smell it or identify it, she will not catch it. Now, after she's caught the first piece of cheese, she won't miss one, right? She'll catch every one of them. So my chickens tended to be the same way as well, right? First time
Yep.
I'd introduce them to something, they'd look at it crosswise, like they were either afraid of it, they didn't trust it, whatever. Once they tasted it, right? The next time I showed up with that treat, they were running me down, right? And
Another
so,
thing, if you can get one to pick it up and run off with it like he's going away from the others, then everybody wants to get after it.
oh yeah, that's really where the entertainment comes. Is if you only have one or two, right? And the first one that picks it up, and everybody else chases them around. So um, you don't really preserve the meat slime from the saw. You gather it up and you freeze it, and then you pull it out, as you need it. But in the freezer, you can keep it for as long as it's airtight and doesn't freezer burn. You
Keep
can
it a
keep it
long
for
time.
years. Yeah, you're not really going to preserve it. Um, I mean, I suppose you could can it or cook it or something like that, but I would just, I'd put it in portion sizes that you want to use on a daily basis. And I mean, you can, like I do with the raw meat that I grind for the dog. I do a week's worth, right? So
Hmm.
and then I freeze them. I pull it out, and at the end of the week, it's ready. I mean, it's done. So, and that's always worked well for me. But yeah, I would just freeze it and keep it.
I don't think we have any more questions here, and I don't have anything else on my list. Um,
Well, Sue said something about Joy asked about lime in the run as well as the pasture. Asked something about
let
lime,
me
and it
let me
works
have a
both. You know, Pretty much anywhere that the chickens are pooping and eating all the grass and turning it into you know bare dirt is a great place to put the lime. Work it in a little bit. First, you put it on, you let it sit for 2 or 3 days. Then you work it in. Then you water it, and then you seed it, and you've recycled. And I would just do, when I talk about reseeding it, I would just go get some wheat or oats or something from the whatever the local feed store is, and just do fresh succulent type stage of small grains. All right. Well, I don't. Oh wait,
okay.
there's one more. One more.
Oh,
Joy said, "How much do I put in a run?" So, Joy, I have to do the math for you, but here's the deal. So, typical application of high quality lime is 4,000 pounds per acre, and an acre is, Rip, you're going to have to help me, 43,680
I
square
think so.
feet.
Yeah,
Okay.
thereabouts.
Um, so, we're looking at about 1 pound for every 10 square feet. Okay. One or a little bit, somewhere around that 1 pound for every 10 square
Yeah.
feet, every time you want to recycle it, and it works good. Okay. Can chickens eat it before it? Yeah. Yeah. It's the same stuff that they use it. They call it calcium carbonate at the feed store. When they put it in the feed, they give it a fancy name called calcium carbonate. When they put it on the soil, they just call it lime, calcium lime. So yes, exact same product. Um, Dealt with gout in a cockerel. Yeah. Um, Again, it's usually either in a cockerel, I would say it's almost always fed too high a protein for too long. And this is where I want to run like 2 ounces of apple cider vinegar per gallon of water, drinking water, to help dissolve some of those calcium crystals and help repair. You can either use vinegar or you can use a concentrated black cherry juice. It's made by a company called Knudson's, Knudson. I think it's Senson. But concentrated black cherry juice, either one is going to work well. Humans use the black cherry juice for managing gout because it does a great job of pulling out the uric acid and keeping it under control. So both will work, but the black cherry juice is going to win the battle as far as which one's best.
Elizabeth wants to know: is barn lime and ag lime both okay?
Yeah, I'm after the calcium line. So yeah, as long as they're the higher calcium varieties, that's what we're after. But barn lime, ag lime, they label them different. Like barn lime is typically used for walkways for cows and things like that because it's gritty and it's anti-slip. Ag lime, you don't know what you're getting. Right? It can be everything from powder to quarter-inch particle, but it's all coming out of the same hole in the ground. Um, and yeah, it's the same stuff.
Lisa wants to know if you could please repeat quantity, and I think she's referring to the lime on that you use in the runs.
Because you missed one there. She said,
Oh,
She had a male Serama that never had layer feed, so this is the one with the gout.
Oh,
So I'm
okay,
pretty
okay.
sure
I
it was
misread that.
protein too long. Yeah. So 2 ounces per gallon of drinking water. Now, if you can find the black cherry juice, if you can find the concentrated black cherry juice, I would try and get whatever amount of water the cockerel is drinking a day. I want to get about 1 milliliter, which is 1 eyedropper full of, uh, of the black cherry juice into them. And the recipe's the same, you know. Whether you would just want to do him specifically in his cup of water, and so whether you want to use start with the vinegar until you can find the black cherry juice. But the black cherry juice does a much better job of managing gout. So
Good to know.
1 milliliter per bird per day. Okay. Um, if you're gonna try and put a dropper full in his mouth, just give him time to swallow. Go slow.
Yeah.
Right. I don't need you to aspirate him and drown him and then he dies and you're gonna post somewhere. Oh, Jeff told me to do this and I killed my Serama. So no, I'd much rather you put it in some water and let him drink it that way. But
Okay. Jeff, do you have anything else?
Lisa asked the name of that juice, and it's Knutson's KNUSD, I think EN is the name of the company. And they make all kinds of different concentrated juices, but they're the only one that I have seen that makes the concentrated black cherry. John says, he uses the tart cherry pills for human and put it down the throat. So there you go. At least if you want to do that, you can buy the tart cherry pills, and they do make them. I don't know where to find them. I haven't bought them yet. But yeah, that may be easier way for you to go. John, if you want to share where you purchase those, that would be great. You can help out Lisa.
Let's see. Got another one here. Is it okay to use
Okay.
lime sand on brood pens?
I don't know what I don't. Okay, so I don't know what he's referring. They are referring to as lime sand.
I don't know.
Now,
That's
if it's so there's a whole lot of lime out there that's sold kind of as in a sand size because it's easier to spread in a spin spreader. Yes, that's fine. That's fine to use in a brood pen if that's what we're talking about.
John says he gets those pills at the vitamin section of about any grocery store or Walmart.
All right.
And
There we
the
go.
boss man says,
Limestone. Yeah. Limestone ground there in Guam. Yeah, that's fine that we're using the brood pens. Since I've lived in Guam and I know the humidity issues over there, boss man, I would be doing that like 4 times a year. Okay, and I would be generous. I would be generous in my application in those brood pens at least 4 times a year. High humidity. It's like a petri dish over there. So, yeah, that's what I would do.
John
Alrighty.
says you can get those pills on Amazon too. You can get anything on Amazon. Go to Amazon.
I did wear my Christmas shirt tonight. Just so
Oh, you
everybody knows.
did. Good for you.
I wore
And
my
we'll be
Christmas
back in
shirt.
2 weeks, which is we'll be back the day after Christmas. So we won't get to wish you a Merry Christmas unless we do it tonight. So we do hope you and your families have a Merry Christmas and a most happy and prosperous New Year. We looking forward to Christmas here with all our grandkids and family and all that. It's always a fun and festive time of the year. So until next time.
Just stay safe out there, everybody. Don't
That's
get
right.
stupid. All right. Don't
Yeah,
overeat. Don't overdrink. And make sure you get plenty of sleep. All right.
absolutely.
Merry
Y'all
Christmas.
have a good evening.